Hello everyone. Today we have the Ask Us Anything, and the topic today is recruitment in Berlin. So we will try to answer questions like how recruiters find talent in Berlin, what you can do for getting prepared for interviews, what you can do for catching the recruiter's attention through your LinkedIn profile to your CV, for example. So we invited two experts for sharing their knowledge and their experience of us, and they immediately accepted the invitation, so thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, of course.
We have here Molly, Barrett, and Mirela, Stefan. They are recruiters and they work for Project A. Project A provide talent acquisition solutions for more than 45 companies, right? Mm-hmm. So they have a broad experience. They work with several profiles and a wide variety of requirements. So I think that they can give us overall idea about what companies look for in the German market. Okay, great. So please introduce yourselves. What exactly do you do, guys, at Project A?
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm Molly. I'm a working student at Project A. I've been working there for about 8 months, and I'm getting my master's in business psychology. So I'm studying a lot of like HR and talent acquisition. So when I am at Project A, I'm doing a lot of recruiting, and since we are like a venture capital, we can work with a lot of different companies. So basically, it's like a lot of different clients. So you get a wide variety of what other companies want in recruiting, and you have to adapt your skills to that. So I'm doing recruiting, I'm managing the talent pool, doing some event organization, and basically some kind of like onboarding tactics.
And hi, I'm Mirela. I'm actually from Romania, but I've been living in Berlin for 2.5 years now, and I'm with Project A for 1 year almost. I'm gonna be in April, it's gonna be 1 year. Yeah, I'm part of the talent acquisition there as well, and yeah, helping basically with recruiting for several roles, tech and non-tech. In terms of tech, yeah, I've been recruiting Ruby developers, front-end, back-end, with PHP, Java, some DevOps guys, infrastructure, system admin, and I guess that's it. Yeah, and maybe to put in some numbers, because I know could be very interesting. So overall, I think in Project A, in the talent acquisition team, we are 7 people in the talent acquisition team. And then in terms of numbers, I actually wrote it down. We had so far 3,800 applications in 2019. So that's for over 3 months. So I would say that's quite a lot. It's more than 1,000 applications per month. So we've seen a lot of CVs, I would say. Yeah. So I guess that's it.
That's great, that's great. So, Molly, do you work with several profiles, and Mirela, you are more focused on the IT people, right?
Not necessarily. I think it depends a bit on the situation, which is the demand and everything. Mm-hmm. So it depends a bit, not only, but I've done also previously some more tech roles, so yeah.
Okay, that's great. Because at Imagine, we have a bootcamp for software engineers who live in many countries, especially Egypt, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and who wants to get a job here in Germany. Mm-hmm. So we try to evaluate them, give them feedback on their readiness for job applications. We evaluate their soft skills and hard skills as well, and try to advise them how they can prepare themselves for being successful here. So we have this program more focused on the IT roles, but I believe that we have a broader audience that may watch this video. So I believe that your advice can help everyone. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. Cool. So let's start. As you mentioned, you had a lot of applications in the last 3 months, and my first question would be, how do you guys look for talent? Because we know that candidates, they can apply for job positions through the company's websites or through Indeed. Xing is also common here in Germany, but active sourcing is also quite common between recruiters. Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, which is more common, active or passive sourcing? And thinking about active searching, how relevant LinkedIn is for you, for example?
Yeah, so I'll take this one. So actually it's very relevant because I mean it's always nice when you post a job and then you have applications and you just review them, but then sometimes it can happen that people don't really apply, or especially if there are more senior profiles. Yeah, of course we don't have a lot of applications, so then we have to go there and search by ourselves. And then focusing a bit on the tech side, I would say LinkedIn is the easiest platform for us because it's basically the biggest database when it comes to professional CVs and professional experience. So it's very easy for us to access. We have like a special recruiter account, and normally for that we just do a search on LinkedIn and we find profiles. So as long as people are on LinkedIn, we can find them very easily. If there are some small tricks, normally because we use keywords when we search for those profiles, so as long as our keywords would match the profiles, then it's very easy for us to find. And like I said, that's the biggest database. For tech profiles, we do have sometimes, and we use Stack Overflow or GitHub, so those could be also relevant profiles. And not necessarily having a profile, but rather also being active. So it always helps if you like comment on Stack Overflow and give answers, or like interact with the other people, and then also on GitHub if you have projects, because normally people can see what kind of languages you use in those projects, and it can make the recruiter or the hiring manager understand your profile better. But LinkedIn is definitely the easiest way to access that, and then once we don't find profiles anymore on LinkedIn, we have to go a bit further. But if you're searching for a job, I would definitely recommend to have a LinkedIn.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, just to give you an idea about how different are job applications between different countries. In some countries, people don't use that much LinkedIn. So we encourage our students to create a profile and to put the more details they can there. Of course, not too much, but for example, we say that it's important describing their duties at each job, and also some projects, and specify which languages, frameworks, which technologies they use.
Exactly. So I would say a profile, a LinkedIn profile is more or less a CV as well. So I think it shouldn't be too little and maybe just having the job title and that's it. Because it's also hard for me as a recruiter if I'm looking at that profile and if I just see backend engineer, I have no idea if you know Ruby, if you know PHP, Java. So I would need a bit more details. But then also having a very long LinkedIn with very long text doesn't really help, because like I already presented it, we are screening hundreds of CVs per day, so I won't have time to read 3 pages.
Yeah, of course.
Also, something that's really important in the LinkedIn is to put in the About Me section that you're looking for new experiences, because it saves a lot of time and it really helps to have a better response rate on our end, that we can maybe count on this person a little bit more to respond or to be looking for our response.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, indeed, there is this option in LinkedIn where you can set up that you're looking for a job, so that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's actually like a button that you can press and you can write it.
Yeah, and you can also write, of course, like at the beginning and the intro. Exactly. I mean, that could also help if you're looking to relocate, especially. That can definitely help.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, my next question, I believe that it was already answered, but maybe you can complement. It would be when you are screening LinkedIn, how do you think that, what make you feel that profile matches the position you have? You mentioned that you use some keywords for searching on LinkedIn, but maybe there's something else that when you read some profile, you feel, this is the guy I'm looking for.
Yeah. So that depends a bit on the roles. Normally, to be honest, I'm doing a lot of direct sourcing for more senior profiles, because then you're lacking candidates applying actually. And then of course it's relevant that you actually have experience, several years of experience. And then it's also, I think the LinkedIn should be quite clean. So showing what you did, like you mentioned also, showing the projects you worked on and what languages. But it's also very helpful if I don't have only like the languages as keywords in skills, but not knowing in which project you use them. Because it can be that you maybe just saw a PHP script and you put it there, or it can be that you've been coded PHP for the last 5 years, so that's a difference. And it's very helpful for our end as well. So I'm mentioning the tech stack is definitely,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you have any comment, Molly?
No, I don't think so. Mirela,
Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I think in that part there's no much difference between tech roles and other kind of roles, right? I think it's more or less the same thing.
Yeah, I think in LinkedIn you should be able to command search exactly what you're applying for, or if you want to be available to certain tech stack, you should be able to command search at least a couple things in your profile that are easily accessible to a recruiter, because that's also, the command search function is a good recruiter trick.
So yeah, indeed, like if you're looking maybe for a PHP developer, I mean, you should have at least once PHP mentioned, or the framework that you used for that, or for front-end as well. And also what's tricky from our end is, like, if I'm looking, for example, for a front-end engineer, it's tricky that people can write JavaScript in different styles, like can be JS, can be JavaScript in 2 words, or just 1 word. So I always have to like think of how people would write that. So as a person looking for a job, you can maybe try to put that in different forms in your profile. So then you have more chances of being found, because maybe recruiters won't check all the options available. Maybe they will just check JavaScript in 1 word, but not JS, and it's the same.
Okay, wow, nice tip.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next stop. The next stop could be CV. How would you guys describe a perfect CV, an ideal CV?
Okay, I'll take that one. So basically there's like a general aesthetic that you should follow that should be at least 1 to 2 pages, max 3, but we're really not looking, we're not reading every single line, every single word, so it should be fairly condensed. It should be in PDF format, Word documents, anything that can be altered is just a general no. And then about the content, you should have your spoken languages, because some companies are looking for German speakers, English speakers, whatever, so that's really important, especially in Berlin. And then you really want to include the position that you're working under, so your title, the company, the city or country of where you worked at that exact company, and the duration, so month and year. Month is sometimes left out, and yeah, it can be really confusing if you worked there for the whole 2018 or, you know, just 1 month. So that's really important. I think the only thing about a bad CV would be personal information. And I know that the German way of setting up a CV is that you include a lot of personal information, which is like usually related to your marital status, how many kids you have, your birthday, things like that. But that's it's illegal to discriminate against those things, so I would just cut it out. To at least have 3 key tasks under the position that you are working at. Sometimes people don't include anything, and that's really difficult because you don't actually know what you worked as. 3 key tasks, 3 key takeaways of what you did at that job is really helpful.
And also on the other side, like, it shouldn't be too long with a lot of text, because like I said, like, people won't have time to read more than 1-2 pages. It's always easy if you have bullet points or it's something visible to the human eye, basically.
Okay, I got it. What about education? What is relevant in terms of education? Like only the bachelor and master degree, or also short courses like Coursera or Udemy, or any other certifications? For example, it's quite common when people take, I don't know, 6 months course for getting a certification on something, and then they put there, this is relevant or not?
So, I can take this one. So in terms of education, especially for the tech roles, as a rule, I would say it doesn't matter that much, because at the end it matters what you know. However, in Germany it's a bit tricky, especially if people are relocating here, because for the working permit and the visa and everything, you sometimes have to have a university degree. So I would suggest if you have that, put it, because it's like makes things much more easy if you want to relocate here to get a working permit, especially if you actually studied something similar to the work you're applying for. If you didn't, of course, you don't have to. But I would recommend to include that. Regarding certifications, it's the same. Like if you have them, sure, put them. But also think that those are relevant certifications. For example, I mean, I've been recruiting for a DevOps role, and then normally they would have an AWS certification. So for that, that was not a must, but the candidate should have known to work with AWS. So if they had a certification, it was definitely a plus because we knew that they know about it. But there should be also serious certification, so not just that you watched a video on YouTube and it doesn't mean that you know that. So as long as it's a relevant course or certification, yeah, I would include that as well.
Okay, cool. And Molly, you mentioned something interesting, which is about personal information. And I know that recruiters, they have the concern about avoiding bias. So I believe that if the person provides so much personal details, it ends up leading the recruiter to bias somehow, right?
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this today because, it shouldn't hurt you to put your family status, your marital status, but sometimes it's just this subconscious bias that maybe the recruiter might have, especially with relocation and visa. So if somebody has a whole family, that means that the company has to take care of the whole family visa process. And that's just something that doesn't need to be considered. That's something that can be talked about in a first interview, written, and discussed so that you already have established a personal connection and you can see how serious this person is about moving. And if they're,
this is more important. Like, try to make sure that you'll be shown as a good professional, as a reliable professional, and then after that you take care of the details. Okay, great. Great advice. Okay, great advice. Do you have any more comments about LinkedIn, about CV? Sorry.
I think that was it. Also, I would stress like a cover letter as well in addition to a CV. If you have something that's more complicated, such as like a product manager to describe like what kind of product you're working on, if it's not clear. Or for instance, if you're a full stack engineer applying for a front end, you can talk about it, describe a little bit more in your CV about what front end projects you had. Just anything, that can be described from your CV that might help you. I mean, if your CV is very clear, sometimes you don't need it, but it depends. If your role is a little bit ambiguous, it's helpful.
Okay. The positions you have, usually they demand cover letter or only the CV?
No, so just the CV is mandatory, but the cover letter, no. However, of course, the cover letter can help because it can give us a bit more background on the profile. And like Molly said, like if it's clear, like you've been a Java developer for the last 5 years and then you apply for a Java developer role, then it's clear. But then if you're a full stack and you want to maybe focus just on the front end side, then maybe it's always nice to kind of explain a bit this change or why do you want to focus on that and give some sort of explanation. And I think the cover letter shouldn't be, again, like too long. I would even appreciate maybe just 2 or 3 paragraphs, like half a page, 1 page, but really on the point and explain why exactly you're changing, why you're interested in that, but not really...
not too long.
Yeah, not too long, because again...
Okay. So as I understood, the cover letter would be highly recommended, especially in the case of people who want to change roles, want to change some...
If their CV doesn't match the role... so much, they have the opportunity of, because when it doesn't match, the recruiter thinks, why did you apply to this role? And then sometimes actually when you're reading the cover letter, it then becomes very apparent, okay, they're doing a career change and they did have some experience in this, they want to get back into it. Okay, I didn't realize, it's very helpful.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about interviews now.
Yes.
What are the most common questions you usually ask candidates?
So actually, I would start here by answering with saying it depends, because it does depend on the role, so it's very hard to generalize. However, one thing that I personally always ask is after I do my own introduction in the company, its introduction in the role, I always ask the candidates to introduce themselves shortly. And that's very important for me because the idea is the first connection with him or her. So it's the idea that they should know how to present themselves in a short way, in a way, but still being quite on point and covering the most relevant things that they have or that they did so far. Because in the end, we normally have 30 minutes for an interview, and then of course I will have my questions, I have my introduction. So if the candidate will take 20 minutes just to present themselves, I won't have time to ask my questions. So that's, I would say, very important to kind of have some sort of short introduction prepared, or the candidate should think a bit what he should say that is relevant and on point and still giving enough details. And then it depends actually on the seniority, I would say, on the roles, because if it's a more junior role, I would like, of course, I don't expect that person to know everything, but rather I would test the approach on how they would learn stuff and their motivation to learn and to grow and to develop. So I would test more that. If it's a more senior role, then of course I would like really go and see what they did, what they know, what they're capable of. And then again, it depends if it's a very technical role or if it's a tech lead or if it's a team lead. Because again, if it's a tech lead, I would expect someone to be very strong technically, because normally a tech lead would require you to coach other engineers. So then I would expect you to be the expert in that. But if you're a team lead, normally you're going to be leading people. So I don't expect you to maybe be that strong technically, just to have an overview of different technologies, but rather being able to manage people and lead them and work with them. So it depends on the role. So I would say it's always important to think what is the role, and also in the job description normally it says what we are looking for and how the profile should look like, and then also the questions would be shaped on that most of the time.
Okay. So do you have beforehand some questions prepared for focusing on hard skills and also on soft skills depending on the role, or you create the questions depending on the conversation, how it goes?
We normally have some sort of guidelines, let's say, or like some main questions or some main points that we want to follow. And it's also that normally if it's a recruiter interview, we're not going to go that technical, because that's probably the next interview or in a challenge. And then we just kind of try to understand the big picture of everything. And yeah, I would have the main questions that I want to ask, but then I always kind of shape my questions a bit on the experience, because if they are talking already about a very interesting project, maybe I'm interested in that, and I focus a bit more questions on that topic. So I also try to kind of make it this open discussion in a way to kind of shape it on the experience of the candidate as well, and not ask questions as a robot.
Okay, great. While you were talking, I was remember some students who I interviewed during the bootcamp at Imagine, and I remember that I have some candidates who are not so talkative. They are more introspective, I would say, and they do not talk so much about themselves. When I ask them to introduce yourself, and then they do not give me too much information, sometimes I used to ask more questions, be more specific on what I want to hear from him. Do you have the situation as well, more introspective candidates?
Yeah, like more introverted, quiet types, yes. And it's not necessarily like a bad thing to be introverted, but I think you have to challenge yourself to say something more than just like, how are you? I'm good. You really have to sell yourself in the introduction, because depending on how shy you are, the person that you're recruiting for, the personality aspect is a big part of what they recruit for. So they want to see if you're going to be a cultural fit to the company, and that really sets the tone. So to challenge yourself to think of something, and it's as easy as the weather, if it's dark out, if it's raining, if it's sunny, it's just something to talk about, and that's something that everyone seems to have something to say about. So yeah, this is a good way to get like people talkative, and yeah, asking less yes or no questions, but more open-ended questions, and just, can you describe that further? Kind of, trying to get people comfortable, because actually once you set the tone, sometimes it makes people more comfortable and brings them out of their shell. But then at the same time, sometimes these people will just stay in their shell for kind of the entire time, and it's hard to get them out, but there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, and also related to that, so I'd say for the introduction, because I know that sometimes people don't know what to say if I would ask someone to introduce themselves. And what I like to do actually personally is to like kind of walk through my own experience or through my own CV. So normally, also as a candidate, you have the CV in front of you during the interview, because normally it's a Skype or a phone interview, and then you can just walk through your CV quickly and say, okay, so after my graduation I started and I worked 2 years in this company and I did this project, then I moved to this company and I worked with these tools doing these projects, and now I'm at this company doing this. So kind of walking a bit chronologically through your experience could be a good start, and then you also know what to say, and you kind of feeling that present yourself part a bit. And And yeah, I would say also another tip here is to think of different situations that you had. I mean, normally as a recruiter and also as a hiring manager, I would ask you, okay, can you tell me more about a difficult situation, about a challenge? How did you approach it? What kind of tools did you use? And then for that, we are actually looking for concrete examples. Because it's very easy to talk in general and saying, okay, when I have a difficult situation, I just ask and Google and then I solve it. But it's much better if you give a practical example. So prepare some examples about, challenges that you had, things that didn't go so well, things that went very well maybe. Because for sure you can use that in answering and then just giving examples, concrete examples.
Nice, very nice advice. And you mentioned before that when you talk to junior candidates, it's much more important not exactly what they know already, but their willingness to learn and how they solve problems, how they look for solutions. So maybe this could be a kind of strategy to show like their proficiency. For example, if you ask about something that the person doesn't know exactly how to explain, or if you ask the person to remember about a challenge or a problem in the past, and the person didn't exactly face this kind of challenge, maybe they could try to think about something similar and how they approach the situation, how was the process until to find the solution, instead of giving you exactly the answer you want.
Exactly. So exactly like you mentioned, for junior roles, I wouldn't expect someone to tell you maybe an example from work, because if they worked only for 6 months, maybe they didn't have that. But then it can be from school, it can be from some other projects that they had. Maybe they had some other projects, they work in some organizations or something, and that can help.
So a bit of creativity also helps. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's move on. What would be, in your opinion, something that people should absolutely avoid during interviews? What should be?
So yeah, I'll take this one. So there are not so many no-goes necessarily. One thing I think it's important is that you shouldn't interrupt. So if I'm talking, like I don't like to be interrupted, and I think also everyone, no one likes to be interrupted. And then it should be, in the end, it's an interview, but it should be also a discussion between the recruiter and the candidate, or between the hiring manager and the candidate. Because it's the idea, okay, I'm presenting something about the company, about the role, and then I'm asking you some questions, then you can also ask me some questions. And then it's a discussion, so I would expect respect and not being interrupted. Then also I would expect that the candidate would listen to me, because actually, unfortunately, sometimes it happens that I'm talking about the role and what it requires when we are looking for someone, how big is the team, how many people are in the organization, and then at the end I'm asked exactly the same questions: how big is the organization, how is the team? And it's also a bit frustrating for me because they never listen to me. So I would also expect that. But then other than that, I think it's just a normal conversation where you have to listen and you answer, and then you ask your questions as well.
I think it's important trying to establish a kind of relationship with the interviewer, between interviewer and interviewee, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's very important.
Yeah, like pay attention, respect the time of the other to talk, and maybe ask questions as well, but of course not the questions you already answered, but
yeah, of course, definitely, because also like normally I'm doing an introduction of the company, the role, but probably in 5 minutes, because I have to move forward, so I can maybe just give some details, but then as a candidate maybe you're interested in something specific, so for sure normally I always skip at the end some time for the questions of the candidate in case they have some.
Okay, great. Okay, my next question is more related to the duration of the selection process. You know that when people apply for a job and they really want to get that job, to be successful in that, they get quite anxious about it, and sometimes the answer from the company that takes more time than they expected. So they get a bit anxious, and sometimes they approach us on LinkedIn or by mail and they ask, hey, I finished my last test 1 week ago. Do you think it's a problem if I follow up my interviewer and ask them for a result because they didn't reply to me? So what do you think, guys? On your opinion, this is this is a problem, this is something that annoys you, or it's something that could show the candidate's interest for the position. What do you think?
I can take this one. So usually at the end of the interview process, either the interviewer or the candidate will develop some type of when are you going to get back to me question. So the interviewer, I usually go over it, and it's usually for us about 7 business days. Sometimes it can be a little bit, maybe by the end of next week, but at least 7 business days is our core. And that should be agreed upon in the interview, I would say, to avoid any confusion. And if the recruiter doesn't say it, the candidate can ask themselves. I think something that a lot of people don't do is a follow-up email saying like, thanks for the interview, looking forward to your feedback next week. So if the interviewer doesn't get back to that candidate within the agreed upon time, then I think it's appropriate to send a follow-up email. So if it's been longer than 7 days, maybe wait 1 extra day just to, maybe they're like about to send you one. And then you can ask, hey, just following up. If you do it too early, you run the risk of getting lost in the email box of the interviewer anyway, because recruiting is a fairly quick process. So if we do have an update, we want to give it to you immediately. So if we don't, then your email just gets lost, and we kind of forget. So definitely, but don't be too antsy. Just wait your respective amount of time, and someone will come get to you.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So again, about the duration and the steps of the selection process, after finding talent on the company's website or LinkedIn or other platform, after having the first interview, what are the common next steps in your experience?
Mm-hmm. So usually the next steps, it really depends on the role, and we are particularly different because we're a venture capital and we work with different clients that aren't necessarily at our office. So most of the time, the phone screen is by the TA. That's usually the first step. Then it'll go to the hiring manager at our venture, or it'll go to the hiring manager, so the department head at our company. And then depending on the seniority level, usually most seniority level above working student intern has a case study.
Or some sort of practical exercise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially for the tech roles, I think that's quite common. That you have a case study to prepare at home, or maybe like in real time with a hiring manager or with some people from the team. I'd say that's quite common actually. And I also understood sometimes the candidates would have some tryout days with the future team, so that could be an option. And then eventually, if possible, and if they're not so far away, could be some sort of on-site interview or over Skype to kind of meet the team through the end. I think
Normally, if you're super far away, sometimes an on-site isn't ideal, but for example, if it is for a lead or sometimes even a senior role or above that, an on-site is usually pretty crucial.
It also depends on about what country we are talking about and how realistic it is to invite someone for an on-site interview.
Okay, great. Okay, for finishing our conversation, before we go to the questions from the audience, what would you guys advise our students in order to better prepare for interviews or for building a more powerful LinkedIn profile or a powerful CV? What would be your advice for them? If you could advise one thing.
Yeah, should I start? Yeah. So I'll tell you what I really like to say. Maybe I have a bit more than one thing.
Okay.
No, what I really like to say is that it's not just the company choosing the candidate, but also the candidate choosing the company. So you shouldn't just apply randomly to 20, 30, 40, 100 jobs and then wait for companies to kind of get back to you, but really be selective yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be working for 40 hours with those people, with that team, for that company, 40 hours per week. That's more than you sleep probably. So it's quite important that you also choose that and that you like that you enjoy that. So be a bit more selective as candidate, do your research. I think it's much better if you just apply to 3 companies and you really did your research, you know that you like the company, what they are doing, you know what to expect from that, you know what to ask, what to focus on. And then I would say also regarding the relocation part, it's also important if you do your own research on that. Because maybe the companies know some stuff, but then in the end we also talk about some startups and smaller companies that don't have the capacity to maybe support relocation, support visa process, support working permit, and so on. So it's always good that you did some research by yourself if you need those things. If you're actually eligible to move and to work here, what do you need? If you need a university degree, because sometimes it can happen if you don't have a university degree, you can get the working permit. So it's always good that you do that research, and also about the cost of living here, about what we expect here. Just Google living in Germany, living in Berlin, cost of life, working in Berlin, and so on. And then you'll find a lot of websites that can help you. And like I said, try to see what is important for you as a candidate and what you find important in the company. And also that's how I know for candidates it's sometimes hard to ask questions in terms of the interview, and they don't know what to ask, and they feel that they have to ask. So just think what would you like to know about that company? What's important for you? If you see yourself working in that place, how would you like it to be? And then the questions are also gonna kind of pop up in your mind, I would say.
Yeah. I think the cultural fit that everybody talks a lot about, I think it's a two-way road, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
You have to fit your values, your personal values and your professional goals should fit into the company culture, but also the contrary. And if we match both, then I think we have a successful relationship, not only professionally but also personally.
Yeah.
And you, Molly, what would you advise our students to do?
Yeah, to go off what Mirela said about really just taking your time to do the research about 3 companies that you like, because in my opinion, you should always be tailoring your CVs to match the company. So at least double checking to see maybe your CV is relevant to 2 companies, but at the same time, you're going to read 2 different job descriptions and they're going to have different qualifications and different company cultures. So basically you want to sell yourself on whatever you identify most with. So if you're strongest in this tech language, you want to make sure that it reflects the CV or the job description of this company. If the company is international and you're also like an expat or you've had international experience, like make sure that's visible in your CV that you were somewhere else. And basically then just like overall readiness of knowing your schedule, making sure that if you do get an interview and you're like, oh, I have a coffee date with my buddy, interviews should be first priority, because the longer you wait in that application process, the more somebody else who's really good might come before you and the job is closed. People are coming from abroad and in a different time zone. We sometimes forget that people are not in the same time zone as we are. So to know when you're scheduling an interview, and usually the recruiter will mention a time zone, but sometimes we also forget. So, to be mindful of not sending, I'm available at this time, and that's actually Berlin time, like 3 a.m. So putting in your research, which I really like what you said about the 3 companies, because then if you're applying to Berlin, somewhere else in the world, kind of like your research about how many euros you want to earn per hour, your visa status, how your CV should be different in Germany versus Brazil or something. Just to do like a little general knowledge.
Also for this, I think a trick could be to actually have an Excel file for yourself when you apply. I know some people do that, and it can be very helpful, because then you can, write the company where you applied, the position, when did you apply, if you got contact, if you have an interview, and then maybe also when they promise to get back to you, and which are the next steps. And then I would say also, like in the case the recruiter forgets to tell you that, ask always, and then you put the details in that Excel file, and then you keep track. And then you also maybe don't, end up applying to the same job 2 times or 3 times. It can be because we're also posting jobs on like different channels, so then maybe you find a job on our career page or you find a job on LinkedIn. But then if you're not doing a lot of research, it can be that it's the same job. And then you apply to both of them from different channels, but normally the system would recognize that it's the same application. That's also good to kind of keep track of the companies where you apply.
That's important. So it tells me that 2 things are the most important things for getting successful in job applications, at least in this initial phase, in the recruitment phase. information, first get information about the country you want to go in, also about the companies you are applying for, and the strategy, having kind of organization and try to have strategy as well, like I said, having an Excel sheet to follow each process, each company and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have questions from the audience?
I can start. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for helping us, for being here today. You are rocking it. I'm actually taking notes, so you're helping my career, so thanks. Molly and then Fernanda brought up something that is being quite frequent in my last few chats, which is the culture fit interview. And one interesting episode was when a guy was just rejected after a culture fit interview, and he was a bit sad because he didn't know, where did I fail and so on. So he was asking for some insights on how to prepare for the next ones. And sending you this same question, like what would be some good insights on how to prepare for this step, which is not so technical, but also you have to show that you would well belong that space and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a cultural fit can mean a lot of things, and sometimes it just means how the team is structured. So those people who happen to be in the team, what kind of personalities they have, but also what does the company have. So like startups versus corporate has a very different cultural vibe, and that usually structures how your tasks will be. So a lot of people who come from corporate have one specific task that they focus on because there's so many people. And when they come to startups, they're a little frustrated that everything is a little bit disorganized, and there's just like a lot of room for change, which is what the startup vibe is supposed to be about, and it's good. But some people aren't used to that. So I think like you can really test this in an interview, because some people actually come from corporate and they actually have more of a startup mentality anyway. But was that like the cultural fit, or what type of cultural fit were you?
Basically stuff like that, like you working on one kind of company or coming from a different country, and these things that pass through someone's mind that say, okay, am I good to work in a startup because I've worked for 8 years in a bigger company, or will it be okay if I apply for a German company because I am from MENA country, or I don't know, South America, stuff like that. So the main idea is sometimes people are a bit unsure on how can they show that they would be a good addition to that team or company. So yeah, I'm always thinking, I always say people, first of all, do your research, think about which company are you applying to. Do you think you are a good match? And once you come to that conclusion, it's easier to show why you are a good match to the company.
Exactly.
So, and your insights as well are quite awesome. So, thanks for that. Yeah.
No, that's true. Exactly like you said. It's it's like basically you should do your research and see if you see yourself in that team. And like I said, it's not just the team choosing you, but you're also choosing the team because you're gonna end up working with them. So.
Yeah. And with that answer, you can also show other people why you should fit that team, because you got to that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember one place that I interviewed for, they had something about like a coffee machine. Like they have really good coffee in Berlin, and they have this really cool coffee machine. It's not ours, it's different. And yeah, I went with that because I was like, oh, I really like coffee. Like you guys must be coffee people as well if you got this really nice machine in the office. But also like a good tip is that some companies are posting on social media, and that's usually where they'll show their more playful side. So, I mean, also if they don't post on social media, then they're possibly more of a more serious company, I assume. But yeah, you can really see like the tone of the company in that, because if I look at the Project A website, you can see the tone.
And I was also in the first call, that's also a good question to kind of ask about that and say, hey, how is it to work there? How flexible it is? I don't know, do you go out for events? Do you go for a beer after work? are you friends?
engagement.
Yeah, like just ask these kind of questions to kind of get a feeling of the culture and see if you fit there. And then, like you said, then it's much easier to argue your own personality. And then I would say also, because you mentioned this corporate and startup, because I guess sometimes, especially in Berlin, there are so many startups, and if you're coming to relocate here, it's very easy to find jobs in the startups, and that can be indeed different from a more corporate world and bigger companies. So yeah, I think if you're also open to that, because like if you work like 7 years in a very huge company where you just did your small thing, in a startup you have to cover the roles of like 10 people and do a bit of everything, come with your initiative and like just do stuff. So think if you're able to do that, if you want to do that, and then like you said, it's much more easier to kind of argue as well. And I would also include that in the application if that's the case.
Yeah,
like if you have maybe a corporate background and you're applying for a startup, explain a bit why this change.
Okay. Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next one.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot. I have up to 2 questions now. The first one would be about the expected salary. Because sometimes it's optional, sometimes it's not. In my case, for example, I'm going into like a bit of another direction, or yeah, I can do a lot of research, and I still have such a range where I go like, okay, if I give it a really big range, I have absolutely no idea what real value there is. If I give a range that that it's just gonna get me to be kicked out of the application process. So can we have some insights about this?
Do you want to? Right, I can say it.
Yeah, I mean, one short thing is that you should have like an idea of what you want, but I think it's really important to state how flexible you are. I mean, some people just truly don't want to earn less than X amount, but if you're more like, I really like this company, I want this ideally, this is what I researched that as like the benchmark in Berlin, but I'm totally open to talk about it, because if you don't mention that, sometimes we think, oh, how serious is this person? We might go with another person who has a more fitted salary expectation.
And then I would say, because I know that in terms of research the numbers are quite different, but then that normally depends also on the company. So it depends if it's like small company, if they are on the market just for 2 years, they just got the first round of investment, they don't have money. So probably the budgets are going to be quite low, so that's the low end of the range. But then if you apply for bigger companies, normally also the budgets are higher. So then you can also go for a higher budget. And I would say at the end of the day, it's also the idea of thinking, what do you need? Like if you're moving here with family and you have to support the whole family, I guess you might ask for a bit more, but then if it's just you, and then it depends where it is. If it's in Berlin, the living style is not so expensive. So think also, what do you need to live properly, and then just say like Molly said, say how flexible you are with that. And you can also ask something that some candidates do, and I like, is like at the end, okay, you say maybe your salary expectations, but you can ask, okay, so is that within the budget? Do I fit there? How is it? And just have an open discussion with the recruiter about that. Because normally I also say sometimes if the salary expectations are way too high, I say our budgets are much lower than that. Are you open to discuss on that? Some are not. So it depends on each person. So I would say to make that also an open discussion with the recruiter with the first call.
But that would be actually that is actually my question. Sometimes I don't know how often it happens that that doesn't even let you get you to a discussion. Because once you get into a discussion, then I think it's fine. I mean,
it's just when you apply.
But because sometimes in like, for example, Glassdoor.de, then a lot of the times then you have the optional expected salary. So then whether to fill it in or not, because when it's sometimes it's optional, but it's still no text. It's just
it's just
a number.
I don't like that. I actually like exactly for this, because it really limits people to put a number, and sometimes they just want to say, I'm within this range, but open to talk. It's actually, I think it's tricky, because also for us, and we have very similar positions sometimes, but recruiting for different companies, we also have different budgets. Yeah. So it's good for us to kind of have an understanding, because if you're asking 2 times our budget, I mean, okay, you might be flexible, but you're not gonna accept half of your salary expectations.
So if you're flexible, then maybe, and it is
Also-
optional, maybe not fit it in. For example.
Yeah, or you can put a range. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say like a range could be good, and then you can also think of your like minimum range that
Yeah.
you wouldn't go lower than that, which makes sense.
Okay.
And then also put maybe some ranges.
Because if you don't put it, then I guess you run the risk that the recruiter assumes. And if you've had like X amount of positions, we could say like, okay, they've worked in this many roles for this many years. They're probably expecting this, so they're probably not going to want this amount, which also might not be what exactly you have in your mind.
Or you can also do some A/B testing and kind of put in something very low for one job application and something very high for one job application.
This is where the Excel sheet comes in handy.
Yes, exactly.
This is what I wanted to add in terms of what you think of maybe. I would love to discuss that in a further moment if I go on through the process. Do you think that's reasonable, or instead of not putting the right range?
Yeah, that could also work as well.
So I'm open to discuss that if I succeed.
Yeah.
Say.
But then probably you're gonna get the same question in the first call. So
Probably.
then you have to also say something.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's good to kind of have a number in mind, also for yourself, not necessarily for the recruiter or for the company, but for yourself. Because I mean, in
As
the
a
end,
goal, right?
yeah, in the end, we also work for money.
Just don't leave it blank, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you just put, I think it also shows something about your personality. Like if you're open to discussion, you're usually looking more of a cultural fit for yourself in the company and not just for the money, which is actually more of like the startup vibe in general, to have like a cultural fit. And unfortunately with the startup vibe, it's also like less money sometimes. So yeah, I think it's like a nice thing.
I want to add one more thing because I know that you have a question. No, I would say here actually it also depends, I guess, on the other person, so on the company. Because some of them are more strict in regards to that. And then if you put like with 20,000 more than their budget, they would say no. Some are more flexible because they know they can ask. And yeah, it's not the ideal situation, but actually it also depends on the other person, how flexible they are and how strict they are with that. So that's why it's also very hard to generalize if it's good to put something or not, because it depends also on the recruiter who is reviewing your CV.
Yeah, follow-up question on the salary topic, and actually thanks for also stressing that in the end it shouldn't be too much about the money, so probably it's good advice not to talk too much about the entire topic in the interview. Still, I haven't heard any numbers, so imagine like I'm a PHP developer with 4 years of work experience, full-time after college, and I'm now applying not for senior position but a mid-level back-end position for companies in your portfolio, right? So you don't have to give exact numbers for firms, but like what is an acceptable range?
That could be a very high range, unfortunately.
we do have benchmarks. So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how we figured out the benchmarks, but it's something between like Berlin average, Germany average possibly,
So I would say
and what we do in our average.
Yeah, putting for like, okay, maybe I should give some numbers. For medium backend, I think it can start from 45,000 up to 70 maybe if the company is big. But that's like for bigger companies, we won't ever have medium with 70, unfortunately.
Okay, but that resonates.
Yeah,
yes.
but then again, if it's smaller,
Yeah.
it depends also. So it's quite a big range.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen from fellows that got hired is that they are on average above 50, but like not too much. So it's between 50 and 60.
Yeah.
This is what we're seeing for these people.
I would say in the end, it's also
In Berlin.
depends. I mean, something that we also is very hard to say, especially for the tech roles, because okay, you have 5 years of experience. But in the end, it depends what you know. Because maybe you know as much as someone that has 2 years of experience, because that person worked, more intense in a way. So it's not ideal to put the seniority based on the number of years for this.
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, how people can check the positions, the open positions for the companies you work for, maybe?
So, I would say the easiest is our website, which is project-a.com/careers, or just Googling Project A Ventures Berlin. And then basically there's the career there. Or on LinkedIn and some other platforms, I guess. No, it's the LinkedIn we have there for sure, and then depending on the roles, you post them on different roles. On Google, if you search Project A Ventures Jobs Berlin.
Cool, interesting. Well, I also invite you to apply for our bootcamp on joinimagine.com. If you are a software engineer and you want to get a job in Europe or in Germany especially, please apply for our bootcamp. Thank you, guys.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.